Picture this. You buy a $60,000 home in a cute rural town outside Columbia. By next year, that same home's worth drops to $47,000. True story, and not the only one. This isn't a scare tactic. It's what's really happening in several small South Carolina markets right now. If you're planning a relocation or early retirement move, this video might save you from a painful surprise. Let's talk about the 10 markets where the math just doesn't add up anymore. Number 10. Wagoner. A 21% price drop in 1 year. That's not a correction. That's a free fall. Wagoner, tucked in eastern Aiken County just southwest of Columbia, once had that small-town bargain appeal that lured first-time buyers and quiet life seekers. It offered the promise of affordability without the chaos of city markets, a place where you could still find a roof for less than the price of a used pickup. Here's the thing. That cheap and stable fantasy didn't age well. In 2025, the median price sits at about $44,500, the lowest in the state. Most towns would kill for that headline, but in Wagoner's case, it signals fragility, not opportunity. When you're talking about a micro-market, it only takes a few closings to flip the entire chart upside down. A dozen transactions can swing stats like wild mood swings, because the buyer pool is so thin that every deal counts twice. It's a strange paradox. With prices this low, you'd expect a feeding frenzy of investors, but the volume just isn't there. The economy is small, the job base narrow, and the demand track barely registers outside local circles. That makes Wagoner's housing market behave less like real estate and more like a penny stock. Easy to buy in, hard to predict, and prone to spikes that don't last. Low entry price, high emotional risk. So, is cheap always safe? Not here. The town's volatility turns every bargain into a bet. If you're hoping to hold steady value, Wagoner's the wrong table to play at. Buyer beware. A low sticker price can hide the highest level of uncertainty. Number 9. Wallace. Wallace is where that cautionary curve turns steep. A 35% price dive since 2022. And no, that's not a typo. Sitting just over the line from North Carolina in Marlboro County, Wallace looked like an underdog ready to pop. During the remote work boom, buyers leaving Charlotte and Raleigh eyed towns like this for breathing room and lower property taxes. For a brief stretch, that cross-border advantage made sense. Small town quiet, broadband good enough for Zoom, and prices that beat any suburb. Then the momentum cracked. As employers tightened return-to-office rules and interest rates climbed, the same remote buyers who once fueled the market vanished. By 2025, Wallace's median home price sits around $82,654, down roughly 13% in a year. That single-year drop shows a market still losing altitude, not stabilizing. For a small town with limited industry, one employer's cutback or one closed plant can ripple through the housing market for months. And the fallout isn't just theoretical. Anyone who bought here at the top of 2022's hype is now watching tens of thousands in paper value disappear, often with few realistic ways out. You can't refinance easily. You can't sell without eating the loss. What looked like a cheap buy turned into a long-term hold by default. That's the emotional sting of rural volatility. Equity doesn't evaporate slowly. It's gone before you hear about it. Wallace still has charm and plenty of space, but charm doesn't pay the mortgage. Its story became an early warning about what happens when optimism gets ahead of local economics. Something a few miles down the road, another border town understood far too late. Number 8. McCall. McCall tells a quieter story, one that never made headlines but says a lot about small-town fragility. A 28% drop in 3 years isn't dramatic enough to grab attention, but it's steady enough to reshape an entire market. Sitting just off the North Carolina line, McCall rode that same early 2020s optimism, easy cross-border commutes, cheap land, and the illusion of spillover growth from bigger towns up north. When that outside energy faded, McCall's footing went with it. The town's economy leans hard on cross-border traffic and a manufacturing base that's always been uneven. When spending slowed on either side of the state line, McCall felt it first. By 2025, the median home price hovers near $80,064 blowers, lower almost every quarter. That persistence is what hurts the most. It's not a crash, it's a slow bleed, showing that demand hasn't returned and confidence hasn't either. Here's the thing. When a small town depends on outside money and that money stops moving, recovery takes years. The housing stock doesn't vanish, but buyers do. Listings stretch past normal timelines, and sellers wait out offers that never come. It's like trying to sell a used car after the newer model's gone on clearance. You can keep dropping the price, but it doesn't mean buyers will show up. That's the trap for anyone thinking the lows here signal a bargain. Even at today's prices, there's no guarantee the bottom's been reached. Until new demand shows up, value is just a moving target. And just a few miles away, another town is proving what happens when even affordability stops being enough to draw a crowd. Number 7. Clio. Clio shows what happens when low prices stop working as bait. Over 25% of its home value has vanished since 2022, landing the median price around $90,094. This is one of South Carolina's most affordable housing markets and one of its weakest. For a long time, that affordability was the selling point. Small town charm, low taxes, and space to breathe. But once prices started dropping, the same traits that made Clio look safe started to make it feel forgotten. Here's the twist. These homes were already cheap. Dropping from about $121,000 in 2022 to $90,000 today isn't the story of overbuilding or investor dumping. It's the sound of demand walking away. And that's what separates a healthy, affordable market from an unhealthy one. In healthy towns, cheap homes move fast because jobs, population, and local confidence still exist. In Clio, the floor keeps slipping because those fundamentals don't. Low cost without movement just means low interest. When the number of buyers thins out, every sale matters, and every lull looks worse than it is. A handful of listings can sit for months, each price cut testing a market that's no longer responding. It's like running a yard sale where even the $5 items won't move. You can drop the price all you want, but if no one's driving by, value doesn't matter. So if you're tempted by that $90,000 house, know what you're buying into. Affordability without liquidity. Getting in may be easy, but getting out might not be. And the next town on this list proves how quickly a market can stall when the rebound everyone's counting on never actually arrives. Number 6. Springfield. Springfield, set in Orangeburg County, is what happens when a market slows down and just keeps drifting. A 10.7% drop in 2025 erased much of the gain that put it over the $100,000 mark only a few years back. Now the median price sits at about $85,071. Not terrible on its own, but the direction matters. For a decade, Springfield looked steady, climbing more than 22% since 2010. Then, that reliable slope flattened, and the floor started to creak. The local economy lives and dies by agriculture. When crop prices fall or weather cuts into yields, the slowdown spills straight into everything else. Stores, repairs, even whether someone lists their house. That's the difference between a place like Springfield and a suburban market. Suburbs have varied employers and service economies that cushion downturns. Rural, farm-reliant towns like this don't. One rough season can flip confidence in a way a suburb might not feel for years. Infrastructure adds another weight. Limited broadband, slower road upkeep, and fewer small business loans mean Springfield doesn't have backup momentum when the fields falter. Demand pauses, lenders hesitate, and buyers wait things out. Here's the thing. Springfield's housing market moves like a slow roller coaster that never quite clears the hill. Every gain feels temporary, and timing becomes the only real strategy. For buyers, that's a risky bet, because your exit plan depends on cycles you can't see coming. So, if Wagoner's collapse looked sudden, and Clio's decline looked quiet, Springfield's lesson is about false recovery, the kind that convinces you stability's back when it's really just the calm before the next drop. And just north of here, another town proves how quickly those temporary highs can collapse into deep lows. Number 5. Bennettsville. Bennettsville makes that lesson clear in real time. As Marlboro County's seat, it carried a reputation for stability, the safe bet where affordable met dependable. For years, that image held. Prices climbed nearly 30% over the decade, peaking around $104,445 in 2023. Then, everything reversed. After that high point, values fell fast, down roughly 14% in 2024 and another 8.9% in 2025, bringing the median to $81,741. That's not moderation, that's depreciation. What made Bennettsville appealing? Steady jobs, administrative anchors, and the sense that government can buffer volatility couldn't hold back cooling demand or a stalled local economy. Buyers who got in near the 2023 peak are now sitting on steep paper losses, the kind that linger when resale traffic dries up. Here's the thing, momentum only matters when the money underneath it stays in motion. Local optimism ran ahead of wages and industry, So when the broader market softened, dozens of listings piled up. The town's civic role didn't protect it because titles and government payrolls don't create private sector growth. It's like holding stock long after the spike. The paper gain feels safe until the chart flips red. For anyone eyeing small markets, Bennettsville's slide is the field guide in what to check first: job diversity, consistent demand, and whether the population's actually growing. Those are the fundamentals that matter more than past appreciation. Without them, cheap quickly turns into trapped. And while Bennettsville's whiplash came from fading momentum, other towns are struggling for an entirely different reason. They're close enough to prosperity to see it, but not close enough to share it. Number 4. Gloverville. Now shift west toward the Georgia line, where Gloverville proves that being near a booming city doesn't guarantee you'll share its luck. Despite sitting within the Augusta metro area, the town saw home values sink 11.79% in 2025, dropping the median to about $55,259. For a place just across the river from one of the region's stronger job hubs, that number feels upside down, and that's exactly the problem. On paper, Gloverville should be thriving. Affordable homes, commutable distance to Augusta, and plenty of potential buyers priced out of the city. But proximity isn't connection. The moment you veer off the main road, signs of that gap appear. Patchy public transit, aging infrastructure, and jobs that sit miles away without a clear route to reach them. Other satellite towns across the South show the same strain, close enough to sense metropolitan growth, but too disconnected to benefit from it. The housing stock deepens the divide. Much of it predates modern codes, and uneven maintenance makes financing a headache. For first-time buyers, that's a red flag. For investors, it's an expense line that never quite pencils out. Low prices draw attention, but demand rarely sticks because the fundamentals underneath work, transit, and basic revitalization aren't aligned. It's like being near the stadium but never getting a ticket. You can hear the crowd, see the lights, but you're still locked outside the gate. That's Gloverville, geographically close, economically distant. The fall in value isn't random. It's what happens when a town's map looks promising, but the connections never materialize. And just to the east, another small community shows what happens when those links get thinner still, where even a handful of sales can tilt the entire housing chart. Number 3. Sally. Sally shows just how wild small-town math can get. Down nearly 15% in a single year, this Aiken County spec population under 500 moves on a scale where 3 home sales can rewrite the story. It's quiet, traditional, and still best known for the annual Chitlin strut, but in housing terms, that small-town charm comes with big swings. Fewer sales don't just shift prices, they practically redraw the chart. In 2025, the median sits around $58,653, down from roughly $68,967 the year before. On paper, it's a modest drop. In Sally, it's seismic. When the total volume of sales fits on one spreadsheet tab, every deal over or under price sets a new normal. What follows isn't a meaningful trend, it's statistical turbulence. Appraisers struggle to find usable comparables, and lenders grow hesitant when they can't prove stable value. For buyers, that means tougher approvals, higher risk premiums, and fewer creative financing options. The fragility runs deeper than sentiment. Sally has no big employer, little commuter draw, and almost no new construction to spread out transaction risk. It operates like a closed loop. When activity slows, prices plunge fast, then swing back just as sharply when one strong sale appears. The stock that trades twice a month analogy fits perfectly. Every move exaggerates the market's true health but never defines it. And for anyone who might need to sell quickly, that's a deal breaker. Liquidity here is mostly imaginary. Even so, towns like Sally draw attention because their price tags look irresistible on paper. But affordability without stability is just volatility in disguise, a reminder that not every bargain means recovery. Just up the road, another small market shows the same pattern from the opposite angle, a dramatic climb that's finally losing its grip. Number 2. Eastover. Eastover's rise looked unstoppable, until the numbers stopped rising. Southeast of Columbia in Richland County, this small town rocketed more than 200% since 2016, going from a median of just $19,955 to $61,213 in 2025. That kind of jump sounds spectacular, until you realize the climb started from almost nothing. When your baseline is the price of a used compact car, even tiny bumps look like gold rushes on a graph. Eastover's boom made sense on paper. It sat close enough to Columbia to feel some urban pull, and near enough to Congaree National Park to attract buyers chasing space and scenery. For a while, that proximity sold itself. By 2024, the median price hit about $64,265 before easing back roughly 4.75% to $61,021. Modest by city standards, but the direction matters. The slip shows a thin market running out of momentum. Here's the twist. Those triple-digit percentage gains were never a sign of built-in wealth. A couple $1,000s one way or the other translates to double-digit swings when everything's priced this low. That optical illusion traps new investors who chase flashy charts instead of checking fundamentals like infrastructure, job diversity, or consistent demand. Without new roads, broadband, or stable employers, Eastover's growth was always fragile, more a reaction to temporary hype than lasting strength. Think of it like a viral stock chart measured in pennies. The curve looks thrilling until you zoom in on the scale and realize it doesn't take much to move it. Eastover's curve has now flattened, exposing just how light its foundation was. And a few counties south, another longtime affordable holdout is showing that slow, steady growth can wear thin too, and even small losses can unwind years of quiet progress. Number 1. Allendale. Allendale proves that even long hauls have limits. After years of slow, steady gains, the market's starting to ease off the throttle. Prices are up about 34% since 2010. Not bad for a town that spent decades near the bottom of South Carolina's charts. But in 2025, the median rests around $59,768 after a 3.55% dip. Affordable, yes, but the energy that once powered Allendale's climb is losing steam. For a place along US 301 with county seat status, you'd think some of that government stability might hold value steady. But here's the catch. Administrative jobs can anchor a town, not revive it. Allendale's lifeblood still runs through agriculture, and the housing market moves with it. When crops fluctuate or supply chains stall, the impact lands fast and lingers. There's just not enough diversification to absorb the shock. What looks stable year to year is often just quiet volatility under the surface. That dynamic makes Allendale both reliable and risky. If you buy here, the odds of total collapse are low, but so are the odds of lasting appreciation. The market behaves like a rubber band, stretched by brief optimism, then snapping back as soon as local pressures ease. You might hold value for a while, but beating inflation over the long term, that's a tougher ask. Here's the thing. Allendale represents dozens of rural county seats statewide, towns that mastered the art of surviving without quite growing. Their charts look calm, their prices look inviting, but the fundamentals stay flat. Watch enough of them and you'll notice the same pattern forming, one that challenges the big picture story everyone keeps repeating about South Carolina's housing boom. The myth of the universal boom pull, back from the individual towns, and the pattern comes into focus. The so-called housing boom isn't a blanket phenomenon, it's a patchwork. South Carolina's average charts look bright because coastal metros like Charleston and suburban corridors around Columbia and Greenville keep posting strong gains, with median prices often 30% higher than they were pre-pandemic. But drive inland a few counties, and the numbers flip. In places like Allendale, Clio, and McCall, the same pressures that fuel growth elsewhere quietly erode value. That divide isn't random. Big metros have diversified economies: healthcare, logistics, tech, tourism, which spread risk and sustain price floors. Smaller towns rely on one or two industries, so a single factory closure or dip in commodity prices can pull the rug out from under demand. Analysts call it volatility clustering. Homeowners just call it nerve-wracking. A modest rate hike that barely dents Charleston's market can trigger a multi-year slide in Wallace or Wagoner. That's why the buy-the-dip logic doesn't apply here. Without deep demand, dips don't rebound. They just sink slower. For data-minded buyers, volatility leaves clues. Watch job diversity numbers and transaction volume. If sales can be counted on one hand each month, or most listings linger for half a year, that's not undervalued, that's undersupported. And if a town's growth chart looks too good to be true, check what fueled it: new employers or just pandemic spillover from nearby cities. These disparities explain why the state's top-line boom hides local busts. Buyer enthusiasm follows economic oxygen, not nostalgia. Understanding that distinction is what separates speculation from strategy, a reality you can see even more starkly once you look past the headlines. Yes, the headlines shine, but the outliers tell the real story. South Carolina's boom hides quiet collapses tucked into the rural map. Wagoner's 21% drop, And Sally's 15% slide remind you that affordable isn't always undervalued. Sometimes it's just unstable. Here's the thing. Price alone isn't the signal. Look at job growth, transaction volume, and how diversified the local economy is before you even think about a bargain. Strong supply means consistent sales and a healthy employment base, not just a cheap listing. If you're shopping right now, wait for updated data or widen your search to steadier areas. Subscribe, because someday you'll want to escape, and now you've got the data to escape wisely.